Well, hello there. Are you ready to head out west and conquer the prairie this month? I hope so, because it's almost August, and that means it is time for the Prairie Trail Readathon. Welcome to my channel. My name is Anne. This is In Search of Wonder, and this is my August TBR, focusing on the Prairie Trail Readathon, which I'm hosting for the month of August. You can watch my video with all of the information if you do not know yet about it, and you can also download in the description box the graphics and everything that you need, all the information you need to participate in this readathon, and I hope that you will join us if you're not already planning to. I'm going to tell you right now, this video is chaos, okay? Because first of all, my TBR is chaos. Secondly, upstairs where I am, the dishwasher is running. Downstairs, the washer and the dryer are running. I don't know why I set every machine in my house going when I knew I was about to sit down and film a video. That was dumb. So enjoy the ambient sounds of my dishwasher in the background. Apologies for that. Anyway, the other chaos is that my TBR is chaos. I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm reading this month. Okay, I have a few basic ideas, but I have no solid plans. I just have huge piles of books that I can choose from that I'm going to be mood reading through, I guess. So it's a little bit chaotic for me. It's making me a little anxious, not gonna lie. But I also haven't been able to make any decisions yet. So we're just gonna go with it, okay? Now, if you are just here for the Prairie Trail Readathon, I am combining multiple things in one video, namely my TBR and recommendations for the Prairie Trail Readathon, all in one video just because I don't have time to make different ones. However, I'm going to put timestamps on there so you can skip ahead to the chapters that interest you. If you want to know my more general TBR plans, then keep watching. But if you only want Prairie Trail Readathon recommendations or my specific picks for those, then you can skip forward to those chapters. Ready or not, here we go. So first of all, my Reading the Classics challenge. We are now in August. We are more than halfway through. I hope you have been enjoying this challenge. I certainly have. It has really helped me to pick some great classics this year, and I have been thoroughly enjoying it. I was a little bit stumped this month with reading a translation. Earlier in the year, I have already read translated works, like for example, The Count of Monte Cristo, translated from French. I am no stranger to translated works of fiction. I've read works translated from Russian, from French, and from other languages, from Spanish, etc. But I don't know, for some reason it stumped me this time. But I did choose 3, and I'm gonna read one of them probably this month. Nothing's definite here, guys. Nothing's definite. So the 3 possibilities that I have are very different. Wait, that's not one. Hold on a second, I grabbed the wrong one. Chaos, it's everywhere. I now have the correct one. So the 3 that I will pick from, they're not crazy long. The Aeneid is the longest one, and it's 300 some pages. So I don't know if I'm gonna feel up to this. I think August, I'm gonna be doing like back to school stuff, and I don't wanna get in too deep into anything. However, I was wanting to read this one last year when my son was reading ancient literature for 8th grade, and I didn't. I don't love ancient literature, so I didn't. Another one that I was supposed to read last year, and I didn't, and this one is very short, so this one would be doable, and that is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Obviously, English was not a thing when those books were written, so they've definitely been translated. And then this is One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, and I started this some months back, and it was too heavy. Probably still too heavy. It's also, I think, pretty wintry, and I'm not really feeling that right now, but we'll see. Of the 3 of these, the Epic of Gilgamesh is probably the most likely, but all 3 of them are on my pile of possibilities for the Reading the Classics challenge. I also always like to give recommendations for my Reading the Classics challenge, so that will be another chapter. I'll do that after this one, so you can skip ahead to that if you want some translated work recommendations for the Reading the Classics challenge. But on to the rest of my TBR. Let's get through with this. Next, we have the Christian Fiction Reading Challenge by Jane Reads. And her prompt was element of suspense. So Christian fiction with an element of suspense. And this one, initially I was stumped because I don't read a lot of suspense. However, I like that she said an element of suspense, and it doesn't have to be like a full-on suspense book or a thriller or anything like that. So I'm going to go with a book by Jamie Jo Wright. And again, I don't have a definite idea. I know I have a couple on my Kindle that I have downloaded in the past. I know I have multiple ones that I can get from the library, either digitally or in print. So I am going to just read one of Jamie Jo Wright's backlist that I haven't read yet, and there are tons of them. And then for the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge with Chantel Reads All Day, her prompt was space. And so the book that I picked is a bit of a stretch, but also thankfully it goes well with my Prairie Trail Readathon, which is the first of these annual reading challenges that I'm able to fit in this, okay? Which is annoying, but whatever, you know? Chaos. It's chaos. I'm going with The Moonbow Night by Laura Frantz, which has appeared on my TBR before. Haven't read it yet. I do plan to read it though in August, because whatever I pick for the Chantel Read Yourself Challenge gets read, because my yearly challenges, I like to stay on top of them. So this time around, it's a definite, and it coordinates with the Prairie Trail Readathon. Now, the book starts out a little bit on the outside of the time frame that I said. It starts in April 1777, and technically it's supposed to be 1780 to 1880, but it's okay. 3 years off, it's okay. And you know, maybe the story lasts for 3 years. We'll say that it does. Probably doesn't, but anyways, this book, Laura Frantz does have some others that would qualify for this challenge. There's another title she has, The Frontiersman's Daughter. This one, let me just read the first part of the blurb. After fleeing Virginia, Temperance Tucker and her family established an inn along the Shawnee River. It's a welcome way station for settlers and frontiersmen traveling through the wild Cumberland region of Kentucky. Men like Zion Morgan, a Virginia surveyor who arrives at the inn with his crew looking for an experienced guide. That one fits for the Prairie Trail Readathon, and so if nothing else, I will be reading that one. So, and for space, it's a bit of a stretch, but the moon is in space. The Moonbow Night. So that's what we're going with. For Jane Austen's 250th birthday celebration, the challenge for August is actually one of the easier ones, and that is to read something that is not one of Austen's works of fiction. And you can choose from her prayers, her poems, or her letters. And I do have her letters. I have a whole book of her letters, and I have a book of her prayers. I don't think I'm going to read the letters this time around. I may read the prayers. That's a really short book, and I've read it before and really enjoyed it, so I may do that. But I'm also hoping to get a hold of a book of her poems. I can download some poetry by Jane Austen on the internet, like just, you know, on websites. There are some copies of her poems. I would like to acquire an actual book, but it is a little bit harder to come by. And so I have to order them used from someone. So I'm thinking about it. I haven't yet. I'd love to have like a prettier copy than what I've seen out there, but the one copy that I think is maybe a little bit nicer and a newer version of her poems, I'm not sure what all is in it. Anyway, I'm trying to decide which one to buy. In the meantime, I will at least access some of her poems online and read her poems. So that will be for the 250th birthday celebration of Jane Austen. So those are all of my plans for my yearly reading challenges. Let's talk recommendations for translated works. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. It has only been in the last couple of years that I have really started looking into which translation of a translated book that I want to read. I don't have a great deal of knowledge. This is kind of a new area for me. I enjoy reading translated works, but in the past I've never paid much attention to who did the translation, when the translation was from. I just read whatever was available for me, which is certainly perfectly valid and an appropriate approach. So if it doesn't bother you, then, you know, just read whatever you have access to. But I also do like to consider what is the best and most readable translation that also stays true to the author's intent, the original author's intent, as much as we know. These recommendations that I have, the ones I'm going to show you, I'll tell you if I researched the translation before I picked up the version, but otherwise they're just going to be in English translated by someone, I don't know. So this is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which is one of my favorite novels of all time. And I think I've read a couple of different translations, but both of them have been older, like more than 100 years old. So, I don't think that they are the best one. I will put a link to the one that I want to read next, by the translation that I want to read next that has been highly recommended. It is a more recent translation that is apparently very well done. So I will link to that in the description box below. This is just the one that's, I forget the name of the translator, but it's the one that's widely available. It's not copyrighted at this point. It's public domain, so it's pretty common. It's everywhere. It's fine, but it's not going to be the best translation. So also by Victor Hugo, I can recommend The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And again, I don't have a particular translation to recommend to you, but it is a wonderful story. I really enjoyed it. I know several of my BookTube friends have read it recently and were raving about it, how much they enjoyed The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's not really anything like the Disney movie, so go into it understanding that, but I can recommend both of those books by Victor Hugo. And then earlier this year, I read The Count of Monte Cristo by Aleksandr Dumas. And this one, I did research the translator and I made sure to get the edition with that translation. And that is, let's see, Robin Buss. Yeah, Robin Buss is the translator of this one, and I believe is only available in Penguin Classics. So this is the edition you want if you want to read the Robin Buss translation, which I have nothing to compare it with. I've not read any other translations, but I definitely enjoyed this, found it very readable. And yeah, I can 100% recommend Count of Monte Cristo. It's a huge book, 1,000-some pages, but definitely worthwhile. Don Quixote, and this is one that I researched before I read it, but I did read this more than 5 years ago, between 5 and 10 years ago. And so I'm not sure if another translation is available or if this is still one that's highly recommended, but this is the translation by Edith Grossman. And I did enjoy it. I found it very readable. Don Quixote is a classic that is one that if you are interested in literature and in the novel and the development of the novel and historic novels just for their own sake, then it is, you must read it. You must read Don Quixote. It was incredibly influential in the flow of the creation of the novel and the writing of novels through the history of novel writing. And it is interesting besides. It's very funny. I particularly enjoyed the first part. The second part was a little bit harder to read, but it was still very enjoyable. And it didn't feel like a hugely long book. When I read it, I was reading it with a book club and we split it over 2 months. And that was a perfect amount of time to read it without feeling like, you know, like, oh, I have to read more Don Quixote. And then this is one, I cannot vouch for this translation as being any better or worse than others. This one is translated by Richard Pevere and Larissa Volokhonsky. So Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. And I mean, I had no issues with this translation. I think this cover is stupid, but I, you know, enjoy this translation. And I love Anna Karenina. I've read it twice. It's a very hard-hitting story. And if you have not read anything by Tolstoy, I highly recommend. If you want to start with something shorter, I do enjoy his short stories also. So they're definitely worth reading as well. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. And I'm sure this one is just, you know, whatever translation is in the public domain. It doesn't even say who the translator is here. I don't think translated it. I have no idea. But anyways, Phantom of the Opera. A couple more that I will mention that I recommend that maybe are not as common. You know, the ones I just mentioned are pretty widely read, translated classics that many people are familiar with, but I want to mention two that you may not be quite as familiar with. The first one is Martin Rivas, which was written by Alberto Blest Gana, and that one was originally in Spanish, and it was it's widely considered the first Chilean novel, so by a Chilean author, although I think I want to say he was Chilean American. I'm not 100% sure about that. But anyways, it was originally written in Spanish. And it's the story of, I'll just read the brief blurb here. The hero of the story is Martin Rivas, an impoverished but ambitious youngster from the northern mining region of Chile, who is entrusted by his late father to the household of a wealthy and influential member of the Santiago elite. While living there, he falls in love with his guardian's daughter. The tale of their tortuous but ultimately successful love affair represents the author's desire for reconciliation between Chile's antagonistic regional and class interests. It was very interesting. I know that there was a lot in there that was like political stuff related to Chile and the history of Chile, but it was still very interesting for me as a modern American reader. The story itself was engrossing and I enjoyed it. And finally, I would recommend Eugene Onegin. That is the Russian version, or Eugene Onegin in English. And it is by Alexander Pushkin. And this is a translation that I researched, and that is James Falen. And I really enjoyed his translation. There was another one that I did not like as much. I cannot remember who did that one, but I did like James Falen's translation very much. So that is, and it's poetry, but it's a pretty quick read, I think. So that wraps up my recommendations for translated works for the Reading the Classics Challenge. So now let's talk about the Prairie Trail Readathon. First of all, let me just show you my coffee cup. Here is the Starbucks Oregon, and it has a little wagon right there. I thought that was appropriate. There are two primary prompts for this challenge that are specifically geared towards the Prairie Trail and the topic of being pioneering life, westward expansion, etc., anything related to that. And that is to read a fiction work or to read a nonfiction work about that time period and that particular topic in American history. So I have a pile of possibilities for both of those things. And to be honest, the only one that I know I'm going to get to is this one, which is also for Chantel Reads Your Shelf Challenge. And that's A Moonbow Night by Laura Frantz. Everything else that I'm about to show you, it's anybody's guess. We will find out at the end of August what I actually read. So let me show you what I personally have on hand and what I'm interested in reading or what I'm hoping to read. And then I'll give you a few more recommendations of authors and books that either I have personally read or have been recommended to me and I have put on my TBR. So to begin with, let's start with nonfiction. The books I actually have on hand and that I'm most likely to read. For one, I know I'm going to be at least dipping into this one, and this is Pioneer Girl by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This is the annotated autobiography. This was only very recently published, although it was written in the 30s. And it is what she wrote first, I believe, before her daughter Rose helped her write the Little House series. So this is that manuscript, but with a lot of additional annotations by Pamela Smith Hill. And I just love the gorgeous hardcover here. And it's got a lot of pictures inside and illustrations. So I am looking forward to at least dipping into this, if not reading the entire thing. And along those lines, I have The World of Laura Ingalls Wilder, The Frontier Landscapes That Inspired the Little House books by Marta McDowell. And again, gorgeous hardcover book. Pretty end papers with illustrations and pictures. And it just looks very easily readable. And it's kind of more of a resource, I guess, but definitely something that still would be enjoyable to read, I think. And then sticking with the Laura Ingalls Wilder theme, I picked up this book last year in South Dakota, and that is a biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder by Donald Zucker. And so I do want to read this one. I don't know if I'm going to get to in August, but it's on the list. It's on the potential TBR. There are other Laura-related books that I am interested in reading eventually. I'll talk about them in a second. But first, two other books that I picked up recently that I am considering reading. This one, I probably will read at least some of it. It is Women's Diaries of the Westward Journey, and it has some actual diaries from 5 or 6 different women who traveled west as pioneers. And so I think that would be really interesting to read at least some of their diary entries. There's a lot more in this book. There's editorial information, there's annotations, there's background info, there's a lot of other stuff. But I'm mostly interested in just reading the actual diary entries. So I would hope to get to some of those in August. And then we have The Indifferent Stars Above. This is by Daniel James Brown, who wrote The Boys in the Boat. And this is about the Donner Party. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm actually also extremely interested in reading this. I know of the Donner Party, but I've never actually read a book about them. So I'm a little scared, but at the same time, really intrigued and kind of really want to read that one. For the fiction that I have on hand, besides A Moonbow Night, I picked up some books from the library. This is One More River to Cross. Now this is, speaking of the Donner Party, this is, I think it's based on a true story of a wagon train that was 2 years before the Donner Party. And I think they were more successful, but still had a very harrowing journey. That's my understanding. So if that's not accurate, and you know, let me know. Or if I read it, I will let you know if my understanding at the outset is accurate or not. But that is definitely a possibility. Another one by Jane Kirkpatrick that I might get to is What Once We Loved. And that is another one about a woman who goes on the Oregon Trail, I believe, and goes to settle in Southern Oregon, I think, in the fall of 1853. So that one is potential. And then this one I also picked up at the library. That is Westering Women by Sandra Dallas. And that one is, I think it's about mail order brides. Let's see. It's February 1852, and all around Chicago, Maggie sees postings soliciting eligible women to travel to the gold mines of Goosetown. A young seamstress with a small daughter and several painful secrets, she has nothing to lose. So she joins 43 other women and 2 pious reverends on the dangerous 2,000-mile journey west. So we will see. That sounds actually really interesting. So this one is higher up the stack perhaps than some others. Also, I was watching a YouTube video recently, and I will link to it in the description box, where someone was talking about having read The Scarlet Thread by Francine Rivers, which I have read, but it's been a long time. And it made me interested in reading it again. And this is, it's dual timeline, and one is more contemporary, but the other one is set on the Oregon Trail. And I think it's like journal entries of a woman traveling on the Oregon Trail. And so this one is a very heartbreaking story, I think, but also I remember really enjoying it. I always enjoy Francine Rivers books. So that is a possibility, and that would be a reread for me. But also this one, The Lady's Mine, this one is set during the gold rush, I believe. So this is her most recent work, Francine Rivers' most recent work, which I picked up. Got this beautiful copy at a thrift store, I think, somewhere recently. So I really do want to read this. So this is another one that's closer to the top of the list than not. So we'll see if I get to that one. I have a couple of other books that I requested from the library that we'll see if they come in or not. And so they are possibilities. And the main one is Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. And Amy Harmon is an author I want to try anyway. I haven't read anything by her yet, but she writes historical fiction, and I love historical fiction. And she's an author that has been recommended to me. This particular one is The Overland Trail, 1853. Naomi May, never expected to be widowed at 20. Eager to leave her grief behind, she sets off with her family for a life out west. So that sounds interesting to me. Also, on my radar, because both of these are on my 50 by 50 list, so this would be a good opportunity to read them. One is O Pioneers by Willa Cather, and the other is My Antonia, also by Willa Cather. My hesitation with both of those is that they're technically more like, I think they're just outside the time frame, first of all. Like, they're just past 1880, which is okay, that's fine. But also, they're more like prairie life, like settled prairie life, as opposed to like pioneering kind of life. Although the first one is called Oh Pioneers, so I feel like, you know, it's got to have some element of, you know, the pioneer life in it. So I'm not 100% sure about those. There are categories that go with different aspects of the Oregon Trail that are in my readathon. And, you know, things like river crossing or dysentery or the like, etc. Each of those challenges has a type of prompt, reading prompt to go with it. And except for the fiction and historical fiction and nonfiction ones, those have to be set in westward expansion times 1780 to 1880, the westward expansion in the United States. Those are required. But the rest of them can be, but don't have to be. You can fit those for other books that you're reading. So one of them is a book by a favorite author or a favorite book. And so that one, I picked Jamie Jo Wright because that goes with something I will be reading for the Christian Fiction Reading Challenge, the annual one that I do. So that kills two birds with one stone. So that goes for that one for me. For a buddy read, I wanted to say, if anybody is planning to read any of these books that I have mentioned thus far in my video or will mention on my video, and you want to buddy read with me, let me know, and I'll be happy to buddy read with you, because currently I don't have any buddy reads planned for August that I know of. If I do actually have a buddy read planned with you, please remind me. And then a new to me author. So Sandra Dallas would be a new to me author. So I am interested in trying her, and I did not know about her until some people were talking in my Discord server about her books that are about pioneer life and the westward expansion. So sounds right up my alley. So I may try something by her, and that would fit for that prompt, definitely. For finishing a series, I'm hoping, as of the time I'm filming this, I have not read book 7 of the Emma M. Lyons series, but I'm about to. So I'm hoping in August to read book 8 of the Emma M. Lyons series, and then that will be finishing the ones that are currently published. Just in time, I think, for her to publish book 9. And then another prompt is for any book. So any book that I read goes for that one. And anytime I read any other book that doesn't fit into other prompts, I can get the points for that. And finally, a book recommendation, which again, if I read one of the books by Sandra Dallas, that would go for that, a recommendation. Or if you have a recommendation for me, either books that I have mentioned on here already, or other books that you have read about pioneer life and the like, please leave a comment below and recommend it to me, and that will fit for that one as well. So those are my plans for the Prairie Trail Readathon. So now let me just give you some recommendations. These are books that I either have read or have put them on my TBR because I really want to read them. I cannot guarantee all of the ones that I haven't read yet as far as what content will be in them or if they're any good. I just know that they interest me, so hopefully they would interest you also. First of all is, let's start with nonfiction. The Trail of Tears, The Rise and Fall of the Cherokee Nation by John L. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name. That was published in 1988. I remember people talking about that book when I was younger and reading it. And I was young at that point, so I wasn't personally interested in it, but for some reason it stuck in my brain. And so it is definitely something that I want to read at some point. I think it would probably be a difficult read, but worthwhile for sure. Another one I really want to read is The Pioneers by David McCullough. I've not read anything by him, but I know he is a well-respected historian, and some of his history books do intrigue me. I just haven't picked any of them up yet. But when I get around to reading him, his book, The Pioneers, I think is going to be one of the first ones that I pick up. And then Prairie Fires by Caroline Fraser. This is about the American dreams of Laura Ingalls Wilder. So it is a sort of biography about Laura Ingalls Wilder. Anything to do with Laura Ingalls Wilder, definitely 100% I am interested in. So those are my top recommendations in addition to the books that I already own that I am planning to read. Now for fiction recommendations. So books I have read. As I said, Francine Rivers has written a few books that are either set like during the gold rush time or at the actual Oregon Trail. And Redeeming Love is one of them. Highly recommend. 5 stars for me. I've read it several times, loved it every time. It is a very gripping and powerful story. And it is set in the West during the gold rush era, for sure. It's not so much about the traveling west, but it's about, building the West from scratch. Another one is The Pursuit of Tamsin Littlejohn by Laurie Benton. I've read several by Laurie Benton that definitely are set in this era of settling the West and frontier. Most recently, I read Shiloh by her, which is the second in a series, and you're going to want to have read the first in the series before you read that one. But it is set in upstate New York. And it is definitely all about frontier life. They are building themselves a life from scratch in the middle of the wilderness. So that definitely has those frontier settlement kind of vibes. Then, of course, there's the entire Little House on this series. Little House series, which if you have never read yet, highly recommend. If you don't read anything else this month, read those, 100%. Another one is Beneath a Golden Veil by Melanie Dobson, which kind of combines the gold rush with issues of the Civil War as well. And so it intersects those topics in American history. And it's set in California. And I gave it 4 stars. Enjoyed it overall. The Doctor's Lady by Jody Headland is another one. Jody Headland is a historical fiction author who has written several books that would qualify for this readathon. One is The Doctor's Lady, which is a retelling of the story of Marcus, I think was his name, and Narcissa Whitman, and their journey to, I think what is now Oregon or Washington, and the settlement that they started there. And they were not entirely successful, and their story is not an entirely happy one. But I enjoyed that book by Jody Headland. And she also wrote the Orphan Train series, which a couple of booktubers have recently read and really enjoyed. I've read the series as well, enjoyed it. There are 3 books in the series plus a novella that's like a prequel. And it's about people who go on the orphan train out west. And the orphan train is really an interesting topic also of that era that is interesting to read about. How many times can I say the word interesting? Oh, this is one that caught my eye. And I feel like one of my sisters may have read this one at some point. Streams to the River, River to the Sea by Scott Odell, who wrote Island of the Blue Dolphins, which I have read and enjoyed. It's an adult, middle grade. This one is about Sacagawea. So it's a historical fiction novel, a shorter one, like YA length. And it is, I'm not sure how strictly biographical it is, but it's about young Sacagawea, like teenage Sacagawea. So I thought that was very interesting. And then another one that I've heard people talk about, but I have not personally read, is A Lantern in Her Hand by Bess Streeter Aldrich, who wrote, did she write A Tree Grows in Brooklyn? Abby Mackenzie dreamed of becoming a fine lady like her aristocratic grandmother, devoting herself to music and art. But at 18, Abby found a different dream, turning away from the promise of a comfortable life as a doctor's wife to marry a handsome, quiet Will Deal. Together, they eagerly accepted the challenge of homesteading in Nebraska territory, where the prairie stretched as far as the eye could see, and only the strongest survived for long. And there are actually 4 books in that series. Wow. That one is interesting. I may have I heard about that when I was younger. I don't know that I read it, but I definitely heard about it. One other that I found in my search that intrigues me is A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains by Isabella Lucy Bird. And let me read you the blurb. This was published in 1879. And it says, a cosmopolitan middle-aged Englishwoman touring the Rocky Mountains in 1873, Isabella Bird had embarked upon a trip that called for as much stamina as would have been expected of an explorer anthropologist, and she was neither. In this volume, she paints an intimate picture of the Wild West, writing eloquently of flora and fauna, isolated settlers and assorted refugees from civilization, vigilance committees and lynchings and crude table manners, yet a gentle civility, even chivalry, among the men she encountered in the wilderness. So that sounds really fascinating, a diary of an Englishwoman about life in the Rocky Mountains during that era. So that I thought that would be fun to read. I'm going to close out by just mentioning a few authors that you can look into. I've already mentioned them in a kind of scattered way in this chaotic video, but if you are still looking for some good recommendations for clean, interesting historical fiction novels that would be fun reads for the month of August, let me recommend these authors to you. The first one is Jane Kirkpatrick. I have read one book by her, and I will say it wasn't my favorite book I ever read, but extremely well researched, and it stuck with me. It was about a real woman who lived out west, I want to say in Oregon, and this one was more like the end of the 19th century, maybe beginning of the early 20th century, and she was one of the first women doctors in that area. And it was about her journey to get there, which was a very long journey with a lot of hardships. But I've always wanted to read more by Jane Kirkpatrick. I just know that she's going to be a more involved and detailed sort of author with a slower pace and a deeper, more introspective look into her characters' lives. So it's something I have to be kind of mentally prepared for. So I haven't read another one yet by her, but she has written a lot of historical fiction set in the West or on the Pioneer Trail in Oregon, you know, the settlers, pioneers, frontier life. A lot of her books focus on that time period in history, and a lot of her books also are based on actual characters or actual events that happened during those times. So if you want a deeper, more introspective story, then I would recommend Jane Kirkpatrick. Another one that was recommended to me, but as I said, I've not read yet, is Sandra Dallas. And she has written quite a few books that they seem maybe a little bit on the lighter side of historical fiction. And I'm not sure that she necessarily is basing them on actual characters, but on, you know, real life at that time, what it was like. And my understanding is her books are pretty clean. I don't know anything more than that. I'm going to be trying her out hopefully in the month of August. So I offer that as a suggestion to you as well. Amy Harmon has a couple books. The one that I already mentioned, Where the Lost Wander, I think. And then another one that interests me, oh my goodness, I don't remember the name exactly, Outlaw Noble Salt, I think, which is based on Butch Cassidy. That one is a little bit tangentially related to this topic. It's not specifically about westward expansion or frontier life, but it is about, you know, Butch Cassidy and the kind of crime, the Wild West sort of era. So maybe more Western than westward expansion, but it kind of fits in that era too, I think, as well. Willa Cather is a classic author who has written a lot in that era. And so I already mentioned O Pioneers, My Antonia, but she has other titles that would also qualify pretty close. Again, maybe kind of tangential, but if you're looking for a classic novel and something more to sink your teeth into. And also it has been a really long time since I read anything by her, but I want to say that her narrative style is more of like a gentle and would be a little bit of a slower paced story, not like super dramatic or melodramatic or anything like that. Okay, I don't even know where I was. I got interrupted. The chaos continues, but I don't have too much more to say. I just wanted to mention one or two other authors. One is Jeanette Oke, who was a vintage now Christian fiction writer. I read her books in the 90s, maybe the late 80s. And she has almost all of her books, I think, are set in the West and during the time frame that we're talking about here of the westward expansion. Some of them involve the wagon train and that kind of thing. Some of them involve actual pioneering and settling, but not all of them. So her Love Comes Softly series is her first series and one of her most famous ones. It's, I don't know, there's 6 or 7 books, I think, in the series, and they follow different members of the family. And it starts with, I think, a wagon train and moving west, but then it kind of blends more into like prairie life, Western small town life as the series goes on. But then she has other books that are more or less involving westward expansion to one extent or another. So that's always, those are all easy reads, kind of, you know, formulaic novels that are, they can be kind of emotional, especially the first one. If I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I've read them, but they're definitely enjoyable, fun reads and vintage romances. And then another one, this is a middle grade author, but she wrote Sarah Plain and Tall, and a sequel to that, and then several other children's middle grade books. That is Patricia McLachlan, and they're all set on, you know, the prairie life. So that is another author that I can recommend to you to try out just for some quick, easy reads for this challenge. So that is it. Thank you for enduring this chaotic video. I hope that you got some good recommendations from it. Let me know in the comments below, one, if you have a particular recommendation for me, either say, you know, one of these books you've read that is on my pile of possibilities and you think I should start with that one, prioritize it, or one I haven't mentioned but you would like to recommend, please do. And also, if you would like to buddy read any of the books that I have mentioned with me, please let me know and we can make those arrangements. Please also let me know in the comments what you are planning on reading, either for a translated classic work or for this Prairie Readathon. And I would love to hear what you've got going on in August, and I will see you next time. Bye. All right, everybody, I have a quick addendum to my pile of possibilities that I did want to mention because I think this may be of interest to some of you. I forgot that I had discovered a vintage historical fiction author whose works I have enjoyed. Well, okay, I read one by her. I read Celia Garth by her. The author's name is Gwen Bristow. She was writing, I believe, I want to say in the 40s and 50s, maybe the 60s, in the 20th century. And she wrote historical fiction novels. The one I read, Celia Garth, was set during the American Revolution in Charleston, South Carolina. And I really enjoyed it, thoroughly enjoyed it. It was like a hidden gem of a novel for me by an author I didn't know anything about. It was kind of like a random, I don't know if I found it on Amazon Prime or something. I came across it randomly and was like, huh, that sounds interesting. Eventually read it, really loved it. She has a couple books also. Calico Palace is one, and I forget what the name of the other one is, but I will put the titles in the description box and I will show you a picture here. Those books are both set in the West. I think one of them is a gold rush and one of them might be a wagon train one. I'm not exactly sure. But they're both set during that time frame, both historical fiction novels. And they are also high on my list of ones that I want to read. Will I get to them? I don't know. But I know quite a few of my friends on BookTube are interested in vintage authors and kind of hidden gems of stories from the past. So I wanted to mention that author and those books. They are on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you have easy access to them. So will I read them? I don't know, but I hope to, if not this August, then at some point. And maybe you would be interested in them as well. So I wanted to add that little extra note. And now, I'm done. I also wanted to mention, because I meant to say this earlier in this video and I totally forgot, but I had originally intended to name this readathon the Pioneer Trail Readathon, but somewhere along the way in my brain I switched it to Prairie Trail, and then something said Pioneer Trail, something said Prairie Trail. I got everything to say Prairie Trail because that was in my announcement video, so that's what I went with, but I really wanted it to be Pioneer Trail actually. So if I do this again next year, it's probably going to be Pioneer Trail, just so you know, because I think that's a better name.
But right now we're going with Prairie Trail because that's just what it was. And that's what it will be this year. But just a heads up, I really wanted it to be Pioneer Trail. So if I say Pioneer Trail, that's why. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy. I'm looking forward to this readathon. I hope we have a great time. I'm going to open up on the Discord server. I will open up the place for you to enter in your points. And so we can track how many points people are getting for the various books that they're reading. And hopefully it works. Technology doesn't always work for me the way it says it's supposed to, but we'll see. We will find out. All right. I will see you next time. Happy reading and enjoy the Prairie Trail Readathon.